Well, 4 months after the rollout of the goods and services tax, the council is gearing up for what could be the biggest overhaul of the GST regime yet. Here are the big exclusive news breaks here on CNBC TV18, which has set the agenda for what you can expect this evening. We will see major changes in the highest tax slab, that is the 28% bracket, and you will expect all of that to happen this evening. There will be significant pruning in the number of items that are currently being taxed at 28%. Remember, today there's about 225 items in that tax bracket, and that could come down to as low as just 50 items. So there is a massive pruning that is expected on the 28% slab. I also want to point out that the Fitment Committee, led by the Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian, had suggested about 62 items remain in the 28% slab. But today the GST Council has gone a step further than that recommendation. In fact, it's decided to bring that down to 50. Well, speaking exclusively to CNBC TV18, a slew of finance ministers of various state governments, at least 5 state finance ministers, have confirmed this development to us. They have made it clear that there is consensus in the council that only thin goods like tobacco and other demerit and luxury goods should be taxed at the highest bracket. But I also want to point out that what we are given to understand is that white goods, as well as goods used by the construction sector, will continue to be in the 28% slab. So in all, 50 items remaining. All of this will burn a hole in the government's pockets. The cost to the exchequer on account of the rationalization could be as much as 20,000 crore rupees. That's not all. The Finance Minister of Assam has told CNBC TV18's Rituparna Bhuyan that several items in the 18% tax bracket are also being moved to the 12 and 5% bracket. And here's the latest news break. I am learning from my sources that the GST Council has in fact decided to raise the composition scheme threshold to 2 crore rupees. So that is the big story that's breaking now on CNBC TV18. I have it from very, very highly placed sources that this is the decision of the GST Council. Remember, last month the GST Council had decided to increase the threshold to 1 crore from the initial limit of 75 lakh rupees. Joining me on our show is our GST panel of experts: MS Money from Deloitte India, Harishankar Subramaniam of EY, Rohan Shah, Prateek Jain of PwC, and Suresh Nandlal Rohira will join us from Grant Thornton. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Hari, let me start by asking you, this could perhaps be the most significant meeting of the GST Council, the 23rd meeting where we could see a complete overhaul of the rates in the 28% of the items in the 28% bracket, and many more decisions to make the composition scheme attractive. What I am given to understand, the threshold could move to 2 crores.
In my view, this is bigger than what I had anticipated. We were on the show yesterday. I really didn't think they will go this far, just leaving 50 items in the 28% bracket. So it's a big bang news. Second, even moving 18 to 12 is another thing which I didn't expect. And the last but not the least, the threshold going to 2 crores for composition. So all three put together, huge announcements, definitely has a very strong political color to it. So I would say fantastic news for people who've been impacted by these changes, whether it's 28%. The only thing I was a little surprised was that they decided to keep many consumer durables and the entire construction bracket on the 28, and also probably that is something they will probably look at later at a later stage. But nonetheless, big news and good news for the industry at large.
What I am also given to understand, and this is the story that we're now breaking, that the rate for traders and manufacturing under the composition scheme will be 1%. This is also along expected lines. This was, as we were reporting, one of the recommendations of the GOM that had been set up. Prateek, so one threshold under the composition scheme going to 2 crores, and the rate for traders and manufacturing under the composition scheme at 1%. But no interstate sales and ITC for composition dealers is what we're given to understand.
Yes, so ITC, I was not expecting any which way, because by definition, composition would mean that you pay tax at a flat rate on the entire turnover and you don't get any ITC. So I was not expecting that to happen. But yes, interstate sales, one was expecting it to be allowed. I think if the policy is to liberalize the composition and more and more people should come in, then I think that should be allowed as well. And we'll also have to see how many service providers would be allowed to come under composition, because as of now only restaurants are there. Increasing it to 2 crores really I think is a very significant move, and the question would be that whatever is the revenue shortfall, where will it come, and 28% going down to 18 great from a policy standpoint, but it's really a big bet because you are then expecting the demand to go up significantly higher for you to sort of match the revenue. And there are estimates around 20,000 crore of the revenue loss when one is talking about. So one will have to see where will the revenue come. But from a policy standpoint, 28% coming down to 18
the hope is that it's going to come from the expansion of the tax base. The hope is that it's going to come from the expansion of the tax base. But let me come to you, Mani, because while we are going to see the maximum amount of rejig in the 28% slab, what several state finance ministers have also confirmed here on CNBC TV18, including the host, the finance minister of Assam, that we could see a move down from the 18% bracket to 12 and 5% as well. So it is likely to be not just 28%, but other rates that we will see being moved around also.
I feel that we are seeing the union budget in November instead of 1st of February. So most of the announcements that have been made typically, I would say, are breathless, and some of them truly leave me speechless. While it was expected that quite a few products would move from 28 to 18, the number of products that appear to have, moved based on what we are hearing is truly humongous. And I think at this point of time, all of us should really be extremely appreciative of the bold steps taken by the GST Council, because they seem to be now really wanting GST to be made acceptable to virtually all cross sections. Whether it is 2 crores, whether it is moving product rates, the only agenda item which I would now be interested in, what is going to happen to compliance? Because if all of these measures are also accompanied by ease of compliance in terms of the periodicity of the return, the number of fields that need to be filled in the return, and all of those, in that case, I really think we are going to have a GST that is truly going to rock.
A GST that's truly going to rock, and as MS Mani very eloquently put it, perhaps we're looking at the union budget here on the 10th of November instead of the 1st of February. Rohan Shah, would you agree with that? Because, the more information that we are getting from our sources, it's not just going to be about rationalizing or pruning rates in the 28% bracket. It's going to be much more than that. And again, I want to reiterate, this is the 7th news break here on CNBC TV18. The composition scheme now, the threshold being raised to 2 crores. And in fact, as we speak, the issue of what happens to the rate for restaurants, will the rate reduction be accompanied with ITC, or will ITC have to go? That is a matter that's being discussed by the GST Council as we speak. Rohan Shah.
Shireen, when we discussed the 22nd meeting, we said it's a watershed, it's moved us all forwards in a very good direction as far as GST is concerned. And the 23rd meeting seems to want to completely outdo that also. So everything we are hearing, to my mind, is extremely pro-consumer, extremely pro-traders, extremely pro-industry. And from that perspective, we can only say that, this is welcome. And, from my perspective, budgets are one part of it. But, to me, it's Diwali and Christmas have really come together. And, if we look at the causative factor, then somewhere we have to ask whether it's the December 9th and 14th and the events of that which are lurking. But very positive. And I think the only fly in the ointment now is, can the GSTN get its act together? Can the compliance basis really stay at par with the sort of changes we are seeing on rate and what we are seeing on procedure and on provision? And I believe, as this comes through, whatever I'm picking up in terms of Delhi over the last few days, it's not just the big changes, but there seem to be a lot of very granular changes also in terms of specific industries. So we'll have to wait for the government to announce it. But to my mind, again, a giant leap forward in terms of, getting to a GST that is acceptable to all, that's easy to comply with. And, the only thing you now have to sort of hope for is the buoyancy in revenue does not cause people to regret this. And may I just make one more point, which is it will take an immense amount of courage on the part of any government to admit that they were wrong to this extent. So if you look at that 28% bracket, if 80% of it today stands reinvented, I think it's an unprecedented step in terms of governance and owning up to say, hey guys, even if we got it wrong as a nation, we owe it to you to correct it, and here it is, we are correcting it for you. I've never seen any change of this type and a succession of changes like this from week to week, month to month, you know, hats off.
Well, so we've got Mani saying that this is the union budget in November. Rohan Shah saying this is Christmas and Diwali together on the 10th of November. Let me ask you, Archit, of you know, what is your headline going to be on the back of everything that I've told you that's likely to be made official in just maybe about 45 minutes from now from the GST Council?
I think it's everybody said it very eloquently, right? Like it's like a massive reset to a lot of assumptions, a massive reset to a lot of the earlier opinion, the earlier law and the earlier brackets, right? Like, but to me, the number one item now, which I am looking forward, and I believe the entire country is looking forward to, is the ease of compliance and the simplification in terms of like the frequency at which businesses have to comply, whether it goes to quarterly, and the amount of data entry and the kind of burden of compliance that will come through. I think the more simplification that is done, it will help us achieve the GST regime that we deserve and we need. So I think like it is like the Batman moment for us as well. Just like I think. So,
our tax experts are getting very creative here in the studio. So Archit, adding to the list of the interesting ways that we've described how significant this evening is going to be, it's the Batman moment. Let me get in a view from Grant Thornton as well. Go ahead, Mr. Rohira.
Yes, thanks, Shireen. We heard about budget, then we heard about Diwali and Christmas, and of course the Batman move as well. I would say 9/11 and 10/11 are the two dates which everyone would remember. So it's a welcoming move, no doubt about it. Of course, one would tend to think, as Rohan mentioned a while back, that whether the baskets which were created for these products were correct or not. While one has to look at these baskets moving from 28 to 18, I'm certain that there would be movement from 18 to 12 as well, and one has to look at it in its entirety.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because that is exactly what the Assam Finance Minister, Hemanta Biswa, who is playing host to the GST Council meeting, told my colleague Rituparna Bhuyan just a short while ago that it's going to be a revision of some rates being, some items being moved from the 18% to 12 and 5% as well. Let's just listen into some of the state finance ministers and then get back to our guests.
The pruning has been done from 28 to 18 in over 200 items. Similarly, a large number of items has also been pruned from 18% to lower.
So
I mean 12 and
there has been pruning.
yeah, from 18 it has come down to 12 and 5.
Sir, any
it is difficult for me to say. I am not remembering, but
that you remember offhand, sir?
I mean you'll see a very substantial list.
जो 28% का स्लैब था जिसमें पहले 227 आइटम्स थे और फिटमेंट कमेटी ने ये रेकमेंड किया था that it should be pruned to 62 items, but the GST Council has further pruned 12 more items. अभी भी जो GST Council ने निर्णय लिया है उसे लगभग 20,000 करोड़ करीब 20,000 करोड़ का इसका रेवेन्यू इम्प्लीकेशन होगा और फिर लेकिन एक आम समिति की धीरे धीरे 28% के स्लैब को 18% पर लाया जाए, लेकिन इसमें समय लगेगा क्योंकि बहुत बड़ा रेवेन्यू इम्प्लीकेशन है.
The 28% tax slab has been rationalized to a great extent, but I believe that you want other tax slabs also to be rationalized.
28% consisted of commodities that had what that previously embedded tax or something, anything above 30%, 30 to 45%. If you are bringing them down now, it's only just that 12 and 5 also be tweaked, so that some move from 12 to 5 and 5 to 0.
Right.
Otherwise, how do you? There's something called equity, no, in taxation. So I'm concerned about that.
So what about the 50 items remaining? Can that list also be pruned? Because many states are saying that do away with 28%.
Very well, you can do away with the tax itself. I mean, that's also a possibility. That would be an utopia. So what one needs revenue to run a government. You see, if you are not interested in that, you can well say we can abolish the tax itself.
Many non-BJP states say that why not bring petrol and alcohol as well? Would Kerala,
No, Kerala is not agreed to that. We are not agreed to bring in petrol at this stage, nor real estate, nor liquor.
So which items do you want it to be rationalized in? Some specific Kerala specific
items?
items?
Reduce 12, reduce 5.
Reduce 12 and reduce 5 as in prune the list in 12 and 5%?
Yeah. Now, see, there is a rate structure. You have reduced at the top. I'm saying that the poor also get a benefit.
Oh, you're saying that you bring the tax rate up in many of these items?
No, bring it down from 12 to 5 and 5 to 0.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, State Finance Ministers there in conversation with our colleague Rituparna Bhuyan. But, this brings me back to the question, and while we all welcome the decision of the GST Council to go forward with this significant rationalization, this begs the question, and Hari, let me start by asking you, this is the Arvind Subramanian structure, this is the Arvind Subramanian recommendation, this is what the Chief Economic Advisor had proposed to start with.
I completely agree, and now since we have spoken about Diwali, Christmas, you might as well ring in the new year, So it's the new era of GST. They could have done that from day one because this is exactly what the Chief Economic Advisor had in mind, And what is even more intriguing to me is that the Assam Finance Minister spoke about even 18 going down to 12 and 5. And he's talking of a substantial list. I don't know, he meant substantial list as vis-a-vis 28 to 18 or even 18 to 12 and 5. So this is really big bonanza, And to some extent, I'm just wondering, is it only 20,000 crores? Or is it much more than that? And then how do they really make up the revenue? Because I don't think they still have any hang on what that revenue number is till March, because with all the refunds not taken into consideration, all the credits not taken into consideration, Tran 2 not even coming into picture. So I really don't know how the mathematics are going to work, but nonetheless, it's time to rejoice for the industry. It's time to rejoice for each one of us as consumer.
You're right, and gentlemen, let me bring to your notice, and I'm going to ask my producers to flash this because this is what I am given to understand, and this is a big headline. This is the 9th news break here on CNBC TV18. The rate for restaurants, ladies and gentlemen, is likely to be brought down to 5%. So all restaurants outside of 5 stars, the rate is likely to be brought down to 5%. That is what I'm picking up at this point in time. We need to put that news flash out. I'm going to repeat this. All restaurants will have a 5% rate. That is the decision that's likely to be taken by the GST Council. I want to make a clarification that this means restaurants outside of 5 stars. Prateek, 5%. Here we were talking about the possibility of 12 with or without ITC, and now I'm given to understand it could be 5%.
So 5% with ITC or 5% without ITC? I mean, if it is without ITC, I will not be too happy with that.
Without ITC. Without ITC. 5% without ITC.
I don't think it makes sense. See, look at, I think more than the rate from 12 to 5, etc. We have to look at where, from a tax policy standpoint, where are we headed, right? If you start breaking the chain in between and start incentivizing people to move towards unorganized sector, move towards cash, it's not a good idea. And then we'll have to see whether this 5% is only for non-AC restaurant or AC restaurants as well. I don't think it's a good idea
all restaurants.
I don't think it's a good idea to restrict input credit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good idea to restrict input credit. It takes you away from the digital economy, takes you away from cash economy. It brings you back in the complications. It brings you back on the GSTN complications, because for all those restaurants, you'll have to flag it separately on the GSTN. If the restaurant has some other business in the state, then for that you'll have to claim credit. For this, you'll not claim credit. So I think from a tax policy standpoint, where are we headed? We should all attempt to make it simpler rather than complicating more. So while we are happy with the rates coming down, and as a nation, I mean, consumers will be happy, but unfortunately, we are going to create more complications. So one would just hope that A, it is with input credit. If not, at least an option is given to the restaurants that, you know, if you want to claim input credit, you can charge a higher rate. And then from a consumer standpoint, I'll always get confused, you know, whether it's 5% with input credit or 12% without output credit, you know, without input credit. So not really a best thing to have happened from a policy standpoint, to my mind.
Okay, not the best thing to have happened. Mani, let me ask you that. So essentially, if it's 5% without ITC, it virtually works out to 12%. It would be the same as 12% with ITC, right?
Shirin, I think that would depend to a great extent. If the decision is to have 5% on restaurants without ITC, possibly this is a step towards simplification of the tax structure. Because bear in mind that when a restaurant gets ITC, it's very difficult for the government to monitor on whether they are passing on the benefits in terms of ITC to the customer in the form of reduced prices, or they are not doing it. And I would hate to think that the government machinery would get involved in doing some kind of an anti-profiteering investigation on restaurants, because that would be an impossible task for them. So while I agree that we should not be having too many breakages in the input credit chain, at a broad level, there would be some businesses which largely are dominated by smaller and mid-sized businesses, where we are going to end up having a tax without an input tax credit mechanism. And that is intended to simplify the process as a whole and make GST more acceptable. This again is a phenomena I'm sure we'll see by the end of the day today, affecting certain other businesses as well, not only restaurants, because the intention seems to be that where there are many players in a particular sector, but each player is relatively small, let us do something to simplify business for them. Let's just make it 5% flat, which is a tax that they pay. There is no ITC, there is nothing to be done. And we will worry about the breakages in the credit chain and the tax policy related issues a little later, possibly when GST has stabilized.
Okay. Rohan Shah, let me ask you for your take on this. This is what we are getting to understand as well. Without ITC, for all restaurants outside of 5 stars, the rate will be brought down to 5%.
Shirin, I think you're also going to see some announcement in terms of the rates for restaurants under the composition scheme. And, you know, I think that will also be a benign rate. And while, you know, I think all of this is clearly pro-consumer, in a way, I sort of echo the sentiment of the other panelist on 2 fronts. One, really, are we forsaking principle repeatedly for populism? And that's a dangerous trend, because there are a few fundamental pillars of a GST system. And the availability of credit, both on your consumption side and in terms of the factor that somebody consumes what you offer, is really one of the pillars, and we shouldn't be taking it on. And my worry is really the factor that in the name of populism, you know, we are forsaking some fundamental principles. If we had the courage, we should have said 5% with input tax credit, because then you have harnessed the best of both, a benign rate and a good principle. The other issue that I'm just a little skeptical about is the factor that if you are going to give a lower rate, but you are going to tell somebody that I'm going to police you much harder, because now I want to see whether you've passed this on. I think that again is something which is not a good principle. You can't say that a benign rate means greater policing, because in goods like what you will have in restaurants, to undertake this exercise is effectively something which is very, very difficult. You know, you have agrarian factors, you have factors of weather, you have so many other things which will play with those prices. And then you can't say that, you know, I'm being populist at the cost of policing. To me, those 2 things, in what otherwise I think is a huge bonanza for consumers, for restaurants, for industry, these 2 principles, I would rather we didn't have them. I think they are distortive and they should be avoided.
Okay, distortive and should be avoided. A benign rate should not mean greater policing. But Hari, let me come to you on this issue. And again, I've been trying to clarify. It's hard to do it on live television, but that's exactly what I've been trying to do. Whether people will in fact have the option of trying to avail of ITC and stay at the 12% slab. But I'm given to understand that that may not be an option. So it moves to 5 without ITC. Would you agree with the rest of our panelists here that that while the headline may look great, perhaps it's going to make life harder?
A lower rate without an input tax credit is a bad design. Even in the excise regime, there were several sectors who had excise exempt and had blocked credit on the input side. All of them went and actually said, please apply GST on me so that I can claim the input tax credit. Now you're going back to square one and trying to bring the rate down and then say, since I have brought the rate down, I will deny you input tax credit, which in principle of GST is departing from the very concept of GST. I don't think it's a good news, because we are only complicating and going back away from the very fundamental principles of GST, which is credit passed through across the value chain and paying tax only on the value addition. So I'm not too happy about it, because now you have so many sectors. You have aviation, economy class without input tax credit. You have restaurants now, the way you are saying, without input tax credit. So fundamentally, you're creating more complications. So I'm not too happy. If you really wanted to reduce the rate, then you might have as well said, claim input tax credit. And where is the question of anti-profiteering anyway is going to be a difficult one to really implement, and also will become a harassment. Let the economics play the role. Let the competition play the role.
Right.
You really can't survive if somebody is going to drop the price. So that should have been the better way of going about it, instead of trying to do this denial of input tax credit, because now more and more sectors will try and ask for this. So you have completely distorted the GST principle as such.
Okay. So
and then imagine, like somebody mentioned, you will have to now build all those things in the software, which again is another complication.
Well, that's a whole other story altogether. And yes, I mean, the software will require massive changes, given the fact that we're seeing so many rates being revised, so many slabs being pruned, so many items being moved from one slab to another. So we are going to see significant changes required for the software as well. But gentlemen, let's just listen into the Finance Minister of West Bengal, Amit Mitra, and then come back to our discussion.
The tax losses in the last 3 months have been phenomenal.
For all states or
for many states, aggregate loss is 60,000 crores by the central government.
By central government?
Yes. And 30,000 crores of the states, because the system, we had said repeatedly, don't launch it on 1st of July. But zabardasti launch kara gaya.
Okay, that's the Finance Minister of West Bengal, Amit Mitra. They're talking about the losses that both the centre and the state have seen. And Suresh, let me come to you with that. I mean, those are the numbers that Amit Mitra has just shared on live television, saying that the aggregate loss at the central level is 60,000 crores and at the state level 30,000 crores. What do you make of these numbers? And in light of what the reductions that we're expecting today, with an estimated revenue loss of 20,000 crores, what do you make of the math?
Well, if we were to step back a little bit, if you were to look at the indirect tax collections for 16-17, they were around 8.5 lakh crores. Rather, to be very precise, it was around 8.63 lakh crores. Now, having said that, the government is mindful that they had a certain collection of indirect taxes, and in the GST regime, they obviously expect the collections would go up. And to my mind, the expectation or the calculation was somewhere around 10 to 12 lakh crores. Keeping that in mind, while they say that there has been a loss in terms of 60,000 at the central level and 30,000 at the state level, one has to see where the loss actually, confines to, whether it is to a, certain set of products or it is across. So I would say the government is definitely mindful that they have to collect much above 8.63 lakh crores, which they had pegged last year. So I'm sure when we talk of a reduction of rates from 28 to 18 and 18 to 12, I'm sure they are mindful that what is the number they would want to achieve or they would want to attain.
Sure, sure. Let me quickly get in reactions to the news breaks that we're getting here on CNBC TV18. Anjan Chatterjee of Specialty Restaurants joins us. Anjan, appreciate you joining us. You know, the decision that we were expecting on restaurants was 12% with or without ITC. But now what we're given to understand is that it could be a rate of 5% without ITC. What do you make of that?
You see, I'll be very honest with you. This is something, it takes me with a bit of a surprise, because the GOM, where all the meetings we have done, they have understood our point of view. NRAI, the Restaurant Association, myself, everybody have represented and gone to met everybody, including the Honorable Finance Minister's office. And they have all agreed to say this. But this, if it happens, we've had it, I promise to you, this is something which is completely against the basic grain of GST, the objective of GST, because no industry can not be given input credit. It is impossible. In fact, I am still not wanting to believe that this has happened, because I do respect that the government needs to give some relief to the consumers and the people who go and eat out. But we were ready to talk to them in a joint discussion that we would reduce prices together if required, and if there's anything that they want to do. But this is going to be the worst possible thing which will hit the whole industry, and will be compelled to increase prices, hence leading to, we don't know what we will do eventually, because I'm at a loss of words.
Well, let's just wait, Anjan, because this is still source-based information.
Yes,
We will have to wait for an official confirmation. But what we are picking up at this point in time is, and this is a matter that was being deliberated at the level of the GST Council, in fact, about 15 to 20 minutes ago, is that restaurants at 5% without ITC. So that is what we're given to understand is the thinking at this point in time within the GST Council. We will probably wait to see whether that, in fact, goes through. But this is what the deliberation is at this point in time at the level of the GST Council. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
But Anjan, you said that if this were to go through.
Yeah. Yes, hello.
You're saying that prices would have to be increased.
You see, tell me, where do we get, supposing we have rentals which is being priced, you know, we have an 18% coming in on that. Where do we get the input for that? And we have labeled and branded products which are coming in. You know, we are a branded industry, so we don't buy anything from a Kirana shop. So all these things which we are getting in from outside with an 18%, how do we offset that? Where do we go? Pre-GST, we had the VAT, we had the service tax, everything was, we had we were getting an input throughout. So this is something new, and I'm very sure and hopeful that the GOM and the Honorable Finance Ministry will definitely not do something like this.
Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, Anjan. I'm going to reconnect with you as and when we have the official clarification that comes in from the government. This is what we're given to understand as of now, but we'll reconnect with you when we have an official confirmation. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. We will, of course, take a break on that note and come back and continue our discussion here with our panelists in just a moment, so stay right there.